Guys, thanks for meeting with me today. I wanted to get us together to discuss maybe one of the most interesting sales that's happened in our market, really the last couple of years. Discussing your sale, a successful sale at 4499 West County Highway 30A. From my understanding, this was, for all intents and purposes, a land sale. And somehow you guys managed to sell it for over the initial offering. And so one of the things I wanted to start off with today was digging into the history of the property. So Josh, I know that you received the initial phone call. Can you tell me a little bit about the property and what the sellers were requesting assistance with?
Yeah, so they actually called, and it was actually a referral from a friend of ours who's in our homeschool group, and his cousin is a real estate agent in Louisiana. And so she actually gave the initial call, said, "Hey, I have somebody who lives over here with me. They are looking to sell their property over in 30A, and here's kind of the situation that's happened." And it was that the house actually, that January of last year, that tornado that came through, well, the water spout turned tornado through West 30A. It actually came right over this house, just tore the roof off, made the house almost uninhabitable. And so at that point, this family had owned the property since the 60s. So, over an acre on the beach, and had been passed down generation to generation. But once the house was deemed not habitable, they thought it was the best time to pull the trigger and sell. And so they were looking for the best agents in town, and turned out to be us.
Sounds like an emotional transaction from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. When we met with the owner of the property, that was one of our focal points, is finding out, what they love so much about the property, what had them hold on to it for so long, and what's more important, what's going to happen with the property to the next people that purchase it. So we really found the pain points that were important to the seller to make sure we lined up the right buyer moving forward. So a lot of that was holding on to parts of the property, just being able to keep certain things moving forward, like wooden beams and priceless things they couldn't get. Just meant a lot to the owner, and we made sure that we facilitated that with the new buyers that came along.
There's not a lot of homes on 30A left from the 60s. So can you tell me a little bit about the house that was there?
Well, the house is still there currently, even after the sale. So that house actually, the grandfather of the family bought the land, and then he actually brought in the lumber from his lumber company in Louisiana and built the house himself. And so it was a cinder block house with tons of just awesome mahogany beams, very sentimental value for the family. So, building that from the ground up, the seller, one of the biggest pieces, we met with them right at the beginning, and we walked through, and she was just like, wow, so many memories. I remember coming here when I was 3 years old. And it's just like, man, to hear the history there when you have that house, and then you're looking at some of these, 8-9 bedroom ones that are next door, or Casablanca next door to this one. It's a condo development from, the late 2000s.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges for us is really hearing what the seller was saying and how much they love the house, but also knowing that probably wasn't the highest and best use for the property moving forward for the next buyer. So we really had to find a happy medium on how to market the property to basically give it an option to be a house for somebody if they wanted to use the footprint, or to tear it down and possibly put up multiple properties on that big of a Gulf front parcel. So we really had to walk a fine line on making sure that we gave the house the respect that the seller wanted, but also didn't just limit that buyer profile for just somebody look for that, which gave us numerous options on how to market the property behind the scenes, either as a lot or as a house, as multiple lots, or one big one if somebody wanted that complete privacy with 150 feet of beach frontage.
So Josh, you mentioned that it was over an acre on the beach, which is unheard of in today's market. How much was the beach frontage?
So it was actually 150 feet. So it was two parcels at one point, two 75-foot wide parcels, and the family had it joined together. It was about in 2008. And so it got combined to be 150 feet. And to touch more on that piece too that Caleb mentioned, not only was it set up for someone to take it as a vacant lot or split it into two, keep the current house and refurbish it. I mean, there was even looks for building a whole new condo development similar to next door, just because of how wide the footprint was.
Caleb, you've been a real estate advisor along the Emerald Coast for 2 decades. What has been the lessons you've learned from other Gulffront sales that armed you with the knowledge to know exactly what to focus on as you guys were prepping for this listing?
Well, really, for me, it's just trying to make both buyer and seller happy. What did the seller really love about the property? What was important to them? And any transaction that we've had on the Gulf with these Gulfront houses is these buyers bought it for a specific reason. They owned it for a long time because of what was important to them. So really, it's just listening and trying to make sure we understand what's important about the property, and then being able to pair that up with the right buyer. So just making sure that this buyer understands what was so important to that seller that sometimes they didn't even think about, and it becomes important to them. So,
Josh, can you tell us a little bit about the due diligence that you guys had to do, in order to prepare the property, prepare the marketing before you even started, showcasing it to potential buyers?
Well, yep. Unlike, a standard residential house or something in, Sandestin, things like that. I mean, for a Gulffront property, there's so much more that goes into it if you pay attention and do the prep work, which is what we did. And I would say it was probably about 2 months worth of prep work that we had to do. And I mean, that was doing a feasibility study, working with the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to get the full feasibility and the buildable footprint on it, working with Walton County to see what the land development code and zoning allows for it, getting new surveys, survey for the full property, but also survey of it possibly being split so that we had our options. And yeah, so much went into that piece. Just dune doctors, because obviously this family had owned it since the 60s, and over time those dunes can start to get degraded, and this one did have some pretty big challenges there for if we were going to do something big like a condo development or even staying on the same footprint. But yeah, there's so much there that goes into the prep work, but I think it was really good too, because it was a lot of knowledge learning and how all of it comes together, and how the timeline you have to do specific things in the right timeline to make it work. So
How did that due diligence feed into the marketing materials that you guys had ready so that you could educate a buyer quickly and easily on it?
often they've got to make a quick decision if other parties are interested. And if there's confusion on what can be done, a lot of times they just want to drag their feet and do it on their own time. Well, what's important with what we did, we already had everything lined up. We just handed it over to them. So you're spending all that money, but you already know what can be done, what needs to be done, and you're just able to make such an easier, well-deformed decision on what you need to do for the property. And you end up getting a better number for your seller because you're taking all that out of play when they're thinking it may be $500,000 to bring the beach back to where it needs to be at. When we do our homework and we say it's worth $100,000 and it costs $100,000 to bring it back to where it needs to be at, you're saving that seller $400,000 right off the bat. So for us, it's just doing all the homework on the front end, making sure these buyers can make a well-informed decision.
Yeah, I think that was actually a really important piece for us, and just kind of goes back to like the knowledge and experience of multiple decades. It was like every time we encountered, all right, where's the situation that could be a hurdle for a buyer? Caleb and I sit and have those conversations where we play, you're the buyer, I'm the agent, or vice versa, and it's like every possible question we could lay out. One of those pieces was just being, hey, how do we reduce the due diligence time frame that a buyer is going to have for this? And ultimately, by doing all that due diligence, saving months, so that we're not potentially bringing a buyer in and they're like, we need 3 months because they have to do all these pieces. We package it all up so that when they come to us and they say they're interested, it's like, well, we can close this thing up as fast as you're ready.
So what we did, we took all of that we packaged together, and then we were able to bring it to the Sotheby's marketing team.
Let's talk about the interested parties. What type of interest were you getting on that entire property? You alluded to some of these answers, but I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I would say we had, from the very beginning, we had a developer and someone looking as a buyer for a home, whether it was to build a home and resell it. We also had the county. They actually became an interested party and wanting to buy it. And then we also had another developer come along too that wanted to build a condo building. And then they kind of switched gears too, and then shifted to buying it as a home. And then ultimately this buyer that purchased the property came in and bought it. So
I think that was the most fun part of it, is seeing so many different avenues that could go down. Rarely do you have that in our market. Normally you're buying a house, it's either a primary home, second home, or vacation rental, and that's it. So the fact that this could be so many different people could have a chance of taking this down was really exciting for us to deal with.
I'd love to touch on the process with the county a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot that we can't discuss, but people out there that might be owning a property that's similar to this, that is curious to what that process looks like. I'd love to hear what could be shared.
Sure. So really how the process works, it's very different than most real estate transactions. One of the biggest point being that typically when you have an interested party, a buyer, i.e. in this situation, the county, you would expect that a buyer would submit an offer to you and say, here's our intent to, buy this, and, here's price and terms. Well, it didn't work that way at all. Actually, it was quite the opposite. We do what's called a reverse offer. So we discussed with the county and their representatives what they wanted for price and terms, brought it back to the seller. And then once the seller came to where they wanted to be, we actually had the seller execute an offer and then submit it back over to the county. And then they would either execute or counter the offer. So that's probably the first big difference. But then the second piece too is that because the county doesn't execute until further into the process, it really is more of like a letter of intent than an offer. So, and it gets put in front of the board of county commissioners. They go and discuss it. They have to agree on it, 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 votes. And then once that happens, the due diligence starts for whatever they're planning to do.
From the sounds of it and what you guys are really focusing on, representation for the sellers in this case is extremely important. Having representation sounds like was instrumental in making sure that, everyone's interests were respected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our goal is to do what's best for the client we work for, and the seller is our first client that we work to. So our job is to get as many buyers in front of them as possible. Sometimes those are regular interested buyers, and in this instance, we had the county, which is great to have multiple people interested, and that ultimately helped us out on selling this property for higher than list price, because we were able to leverage multiple buyers interested at one time. And then there was just a level of a fear of missing out for the buyer to go, you know what, I don't want this to go elsewhere. So what we did very well for our seller is just, accentuating each one of these buyers and having them, kind of play against each other on who's willing to take down the property first and bring the best outcome for the seller.
You mentioned fear of missing out. That is such an emotional piece that is maybe void in primary markets. But to your point earlier, Caleb, you mentioned, these properties mean something to people, whether it means something to the seller who grew up in the home, or it means something to the buyer for what it's going to provide their family in the future. There's a lot of emotions. This was a deal where emotions were involved. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of getting that first part of the parcel under contract closed, and then what that strategy had to be in order to bring the second half back to market and effectively closing that as well?
A lot of it did involve the county and being able to know they have such a need and desire for beach right now. So just having them as an interested party kept our upcoming or the new buyer who purchased that parcel going, I don't want to lose to the county. I need this parcel, for privacy reasons and maybe future goals for my family. So like you're talking about, people come down here for years and years and decades of having that view, and it can be gone in an instant if you don't move quick enough on it. So our job working for the seller was to keep both parties aware of each other. You need to know that other people could take this away and that view could be gone. So that helped us to get that fear of missing out and be able to benefit our seller for a significantly higher price.
So in this case, taking a stance of being absolutely transparent with every party and being, for all intents of the word, ethically driven in your communications benefited everybody.
Situations like that is using leverage. How can we leverage the information that we've gained by speaking well with other agents and understanding the buyer's goals to be able to get a better offer coming in from both sides of the transaction? So ultimately, we're working to get the most money for the seller as possible. So it's not just receiving offers and presenting them, it's finding more about what's the plan, why does this buyer want this, and then explaining why it was so important to our seller to see if we can heighten and bring that offer even higher. So I think what was really important about kind of our marketing of this property is we tested out selling it as one big parcel. We ran that option. We had some offers that came in that didn't work out, but we didn't get the offer we wanted. So, Josh and I came with a strategy to the seller of, let's look at subdividing this parcel. That way we're bringing significantly larger buyer pool in that can afford $6 million versus $12 million. So we were able to bring in more money for the seller because of getting creative with the lot split. And that took no time. Once we did that, we were under contract immediately. So I think that was probably one of the best moves we had for the seller.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of ties into how the knowledge of the land development code and the zoning, things like that, we've seen other properties that are very similar to ours that tried to do lot splits and it took 6, 8, 9 months. But we had the knowledge of digging in. I mean, the land development code and the county ordinances are hundreds of pages, and I read through all of them, just to really know the fine print. And what it boiled down to was that our property actually used to be 2 properties and had 2 legal descriptions. It took 1 day to split this lot, and so and that was a value add that we were able to present not only to our seller to be okay with that, but also to the buyer of, hey, this isn't going to take months and months. If you want half, we can do it like that.
And that just circles back to what we talked about a little earlier. It's preparation. So it was continuously learning from offers that were coming in, learning for struggles that we were running into on trying to get the property moved, and then doing the due diligence behind the scenes to go, hey, what else can be done? And setting up the next buyer for success and enough of a value that they're willing to bring us above list price, which is very hard to do in this market currently.
Speaking of list price, let's talk about some statistics. People that are sitting here wondering, okay, so you initially offer the property at $11.95, so just under $12 million. When you initially sold the first half of the parcel and you successfully lot split, what was the sales price on that lot?
Almost $6 million
for a 75-foot lot, so that evenly split. And then Caleb, you talked about reintroducing the property for the second lot. What did that come to market at?
We initially thought about bringing it at 6, but we increased it up to 6.25 just because there's not any other desirable beach in that location. So we moved it up to 6.25. And then we ended up hearing interest that the county was interested again. We had more buyers interested, so we went back to the seller and said, let's increase the price a little bit, because a lot of the times we're going to get negotiation in a market like this. So let's increase the price, build in a little bit of room for negotiations. But because of the timing and when we did it, the new buyer said, I don't want to lose this. And just overnight, we got an additional $250,000 for the seller just because we did one quick price adjustment. So they didn't want to miss out on it. They were willing to pay over $500,000 more than the closing that had just occurred the previous month. So, I mean, that was huge for us in a buyer's market where you're used to seeing people come down 5, 10, 15, 20% on some of these. getting above list price was somewhat unheard of.
And that was all strategy.
Our opinion, the lot that we sold for $6.5 million over $6 million was probably a little bit more inferior to the one that was $6 million, but it was a supply and demand issue. And this other lot was right next to a condominium, so the privacy wouldn't have been as good as the other one that we just sold at $6 million. But the fact that the beach is so prized and there's not much of it, we were able to utilize what that property did have on it. And it did have an existing footprint with that house. So the sales pitch for us on that was to be able to go, you know what, if you remove that house to keep the foundation, you're able to keep your house a little closer to the beach. And we know how important that is for views. So you can build on that existing footprint and back and not have as many issues as you would see based on the Coastal Construction Control Line and the DEP. So I think that was instrumental as well, being able to speak to that and to coach people on what could go there versus the lot next door didn't have an existing structure. So it's going to be a little harder to get closer to the beach. And it's all about those views.
One of the things I'd love to hear about, now that we kind of know the details of the transaction, I want to hear about a few other Gulffront experiences you guys have had that really fed into your knowledge of exactly what to do on this. Because you guys have been selling Gulffront real estate, Caleb, decades, and everywhere from Navarre to Panama City and everywhere in between. So can you think of any situation that really gave you the knowledge of exactly what to do in this case?
Well, I think for myself, doing this for 23 years, you learn from mistakes and you learn from each transaction that's occurred and how you can be better. The property was already unique enough in the different angles we had to go from a marketing standpoint. But really, I think the biggest gain that we have from all this experience and working with Gulffront Properties is really finding out what the buyer's looking for and leveraging what was important to the seller.
How important was it that your client trusted you and kind of gave you guys carte blanche to try these options out in order to then achieve success for them?
Well, ultimately, it's kind of what Caleb was just tapping into before too, is that trust and relationship are the most important piece, especially at the very beginning. I mean, it's not about how can I gain your trust or show it immediately off the bat, but it is building it through time. And this property was a year-long process, but the big thing is that from the very beginning, it's about the relationship and about the wants and needs that seller or buyer has. In this case, the seller. We interviewed against other agents, brokerages for this property or for this listing. But the big thing the seller said that made a huge difference for her was that when we came in, the very last thing that we talked to her about was price and what she could sell and what she could get it for. The first thing we did was ask her, like, tell me about this property and what makes it so special to you. Because then that gives us the ability to be able to relay that to a potential buyer of what's so special about this property, because that's ultimately what they're looking at. What makes it so special that I want to buy it? And really big focus on that too, that that Caleb's also done with me over the years is focusing on your why. So for me, I see that as like, I don't sell real estate. That's not my job. I sell emotional states. So I'm focusing on what is the key driver, the emotion that the buyer or seller has, and how do I relay that to the opposite party to get them to marry up and put a contract in and close a property.
And I think in regards to the trust side of things, when a seller is going to work with an agency, number one, they have to trust and enjoy working with the agent. But I think what's equally important is, do they trust the brand? Do they trust the company? And that's where Sotheby's shines. We have just an unbelievable lineage of success in all things real estate. And it was very easy for us to point out all the benefits they're going to have going underneath the Scenic Sotheby's brand. So just seeing our blue sign in front of the property brought tons of calls. You're used to seeing the Sotheby's brand no matter what city, state, or even country you're in. So they right off the bat had the brand recognition. that you're not going to get with these local companies that don't have the reach that we do at Sotheby's. So they already knew success follows Sotheby's. So then it really just comes down, do you like the agents? Do you like the team? Do they have your best interests in mind? And that's where I think, Josh and I knocked it out of the park, just because we're listening to what's important to the seller. And then we're pairing that up with the success that Sotheby's brings to the table from a marketing side. How is our reach versus everybody else's? And, there's a reason why we're number one in town. And that's because of what we're blessed with Sotheby's marketing and the brand that follows us.
Let's segue into what this experience taught you about what other buyers are looking for in today's beach market. So from the learnings that you guys had, if I own a home that's either on the beach, maybe a couple rows back from the beach, what are those buyers that engaged you guys looking for so that I can best prepare before obviously I call you to then list my home?
I mean, ultimately, it still comes back to the preparation. And right now, we're dealing with a unique market on the rental side of things. So if a property is a rental property, you want to make sure that your property's set up for success. You're working with a good rental company that's going to get your numbers up higher so we can have more of a business, not just a property being sold. So, you try to set a property up for success with the right rental company, getting good rental numbers so you're able to pitch more than just a piece of real estate. And then on the other side of it, if it's not been a rental property and it's just a primary home or a second home, you have that as a brag point. This home is in unbelievable shape. It's ready for the next buyer who appreciates a property that's not been utilized as a rental. So, it can be both sides of the coin on which one's more important. But, as important as our beaches are right now, either being on the beach or very close to it is huge. I mean, obviously it's a more of a price to pay, but the value you get from a rental perspective is through the roof. And we're seeing a little bit of challenges on people that are significantly further back from the beach, because just gaining access to the beach is a challenge right now. So the fact that if you have it, you have just an unbelievable commodity that is remarkably valuable right now.
And I think the other key point too is that it's not just about having the knowledge of what can be done on specific properties. It's about truly knowing it and being able to regurgitate it to a potential buyer that comes into the market, because that was one of the big things that I noticed a lot on the calls from buyers or buyer agents was like, tell me what can be built on this, or what can I do on this? Where's my limits? Or, oh, we're looking to build, a condo building. So what goes into all of that? And having all of those pieces to reference all, the land development code and the CCCL lines, CPZs, dune restorations, how far your setbacks are, things like that. If you go up specific heights, does it increase your setbacks and what to? Not just having that knowledge, but truly knowing it and being able to just go and give it right to that buyer right there on that initial call. That's the difference of somebody saying, hey, tell me about this, and it's all, I'll get back to you. And they're like, nah, but that, I would say for Gulf front and right off of the Gulf, that it's a little bit different and a lot more goes into that side than a different property. So,
and for us, it's all about highest and best use. So there's certain properties that are older that may have a better option rather than just selling as this house. So that's all part of the due diligence that we do when we work with these sellers. Hey, how can we bring this to market in a different way that's going to bring you more money? Because sometimes it's not just putting what's in front of you right on the market. It's let's get creative. Let's get some plans. What else can be done here? Could another property be added on your lot? What can we do to increase the likelihood of a buyer going, man, that would work out perfect for me versus what it sits at right now? So just getting creative. And you only learn that based off of doing the behind the scenes work with the county, knowing what can be put in certain places, and then just getting property set up for success. Whether you can't add additional square footage to it or not, what can we do to set your property up for success for that buyer? What are they looking for right now? And we know exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for turnkey. They're looking for something that they can bring their family to and not have to do a ton of work when they come in town. So we do have a unique market with finicky buyers. So if we can have your property dialed in by the day we hit MLS, it gives significantly a better opportunity for you to get to the closing table. So a lot of that is analyzing the property before we ever bring it to market. then, either getting inspections done. What can we do to make your property better? How's it going to shine online? Because everybody's looking online. They're not walking into a real estate shop right now trying to look for real estate. They're on their phone. How can we put this property in its best light? How can we market it different than the competition? And that's what, Sotheby's brings to the table. Our marketing department is second to none. So being able to have that behind us, accentuate your property, find its highest and best use, it's inevitably going to get the seller a lot more money at the finish line.
What was the craziest thing someone wanted to do on this lot? And obviously, a condominium complex is pretty out there. But what would you say someone called and told you they wanted to do, and you were like, "Oh wow, that's a first"?
Well, first of all, according to the land development code and all of the restrictions, this could have been done. Possibility, they have to get approvals, but it was to build a 3-story parking garage with a rooftop bar and pool, and have the beach as like a private resort, and then have basically paid parking, so a private owner, but paid parking available to the public, and then have a rooftop bar and pool. And then the beach was like a little resort style, put chairs out, like couches out, white couches out on the beach, and rent that out too. It was that was probably the most bizarre one to me.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, the one that I thought made the most sense, and it just didn't come to the finish line, was an inland development that didn't have beach access, was looking at pushing that as their private beach access for a neighborhood that was inland. And I thought that would have brought tremendous value for every lot that was available in there for new construction. Hey, it comes with a deeded beach access. So I thought that one was going to make it to the finish line, but they just couldn't get the funds together to pull it off at that time. But I thought that would have been a cool usage of the property by far. And then we did have somebody thinking about putting 8 different properties on it. And I didn't want that, even though it allowed for it. It would have just looked so crowded that we're really glad it got in hands that weren't going to try to just maximize and take away, the views. And I think the right people got it.
So in the end, you guys were able to sell hopes and dreams to the new owners, which are excited to have the opportunity to have some freedom to create an oasis for themselves and have, the opportunity of time on their hand. They're not an HOA that had a build out time requirement. And then on the other side, your sellers, I'm guessing, are very happy with you.
I would say so.
To say the least. Yeah. So, what this has afforded them is a little bit more freedom to come when they want to. And they also have a lot more money that they can utilize, stay wherever they want to. But honestly, they love 30A so much, they're already coming back. So we're able to put them in different areas, and they get to have larger gatherings because the house was a little bit small. So this has afforded them the option to have bigger family events at other properties. But, the seller was just thrilled with everything that the Midget Group brought to the table. So I think we played our hand as well as can be done. We were given a set of cards and made the best hand out of it we possibly could have.
I would say that that's exactly the outcome you guys achieved. So is there any final thoughts as it relates to the story of this home, your experience, and everything that led to culminating this successful price point for the seller? Is there any takeaways that are important to you that you'd love to share?
I think for me, I just feel blessed to have had the opportunity to work with Josh on this, to work with sellers that were understanding, like you said earlier, trustworthy, giving us a chance to get creative with what could be done with their property and entrusting us to get the best outcome for them. And it ended up working out that way. So for me, it's all about the experience. It's all about making sellers enjoy the process. And it's hard. Sometimes it's extremely stressful dealing with these type of price points. It as long as you are taking into consideration how they're feeling, putting yourself in their shoes, it always comes out with a better outcome. So for me, I just feel blessed to have an opportunity to work on such a great property that had its intricacies to it. But any opportunity working with sellers that we enjoy, making it an easy process for them, I think is huge. So a lot of people just don't check the boxes that we do to make sure it's an easy process. There's surprises left and right because they didn't do their homework. And I think that's what makes us stand apart, within Sotheby's and within this area. We really do a lot behind the scenes before we ever even meet with the client, especially before we ever bring it to market, because the more you can prepare, the more successful you're going to be. So, fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Love it. Josh, were there any takeaways that you would love to share?
I mean, I think that's a great point too, is, Caleb mentioned all the piece behind the scenes, and sure, not necessarily easy. We made it as easy and comfortable for the seller as we could, but big piece there is really the behind the scenes. I mean, over a year-long listing, we probably spent 2 solid months of work on, and what I mean by that is if 2 full months of work, phone calls, him and I talking on best strategy for our seller, hopping on the calls with the seller because they're not local, having them come down here, us going down to the property and talking about the vision. And I mean, all that goes into it. It's not like we said, it's using the Sotheby's brand. We're not just throwing this on MLS, and we're not just putting the sign up and then waiting for calls. We're doing strategy sessions. We're talking about all the different, obstacles that could come ahead. There's a lot more that goes into it, at least in the Mitchell Group.
Guys, how can people find you? How can they follow your journey representing buyers and sellers? Where can they find you online, whether it's on social media? Share.
Well, you can reach us on our individual websites within Sotheby's. For myself, you can follow on Instagram, on Facebook. So Facebook's my first and last name, and Instagram is realtor_Josh Escabel.
Just like our properties that we market, we're everywhere. So you can find us on Sotheby's.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. We're out there just like our properties are for everybody to find us. So
I'm sure plenty of people will want to interact and follow you guys. So congratulations on the fantastic sale. Congratulations to the new owners of the property and to the sellers. I can't wait to see what they decide to do next on their journey on 30A, and congratulations to you both.
absolutely. Thanks, Adam. And we appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, of course.